David R. Breuhan is Vice President and Portfolio Manager with the private investment firm of Gregory J. Schwartz & Company in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. He manages corporate retirement plans and is a personal financial planner. Captain Breuhan served in the in the United States, Germany, and Middle East for 7 years as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. Following completion of airborne and ranger training, he served with the 1st Squadron, 1st Cavalry, along the Iron Curtain. He served as the commander of Bravo Troop 3rd Armor Cavalry Regiment Operation Desert Storm. For 13 years, he has taught as an adjunct professor at Walsh College. He is a guest lecturer at the University of Detroit Mercy. He has published in Barron's, the Detroit News, Crane's Detroit Business, the Marine Corps Gazette, and Infantry Magazine. Boy, that's a diverse group there. He has appeared on Neil Cavuto and National Public Radio. David has briefed the Vice President of the United States, members of Congress, and the United States International Trade Commission. He received a Bachelor of Science from the University of the United States Military Academy at West Point and a Master's of Science in Finance from Walsh College. His new book, Spread the Wealth, More Has, Fewer Have-Nots, will be released on November 1st by Hamilton Books. I present to you David Breuhan.
When I was in 1st Armored Division, we served along the Iron Curtain, and all outfits in the Army have nicknames, and ours was no different. It was called Old Ironsides. And Old Ironsides was named after a ship, the USS Constitution. It sits in Boston Harbor today. And according to the ship's log, the crew of 475 officers and men were tasked with a mission that they set to sail in July of 1789. The mission was to engage and destroy British shipping on the high seas. There were 7,100 cannonballs, about 60,000 gallons of rum from Boston, about 40,000 gallons of water and other provisions. They set sail, and their first port of call was Jamaica, where they offloaded provisions and about 60,000 gallons of rum. They sailed east to the Azores, where they landed in November of 1798 and offloaded 40,000 gallons of Portuguese wine. They headed north to the British Isles and sank 5 British men of war and 13 merchantmen, offloading only the rum on board. With no ammunition, in January of 1799, they sailed up the Firth of Clyde in Scotland and, raiding a whiskey distillery, captured 40,000 gallons of single malt Scotch. They returned to Boston in February of 1799 with no food, no ammunition, no Portuguese wine, no single malt Scotch, no rum, and 40,000 gallons of stagnant water. A happy crew. Your year begins now in the new Centurion program, and we are going to impart in you 2 major missions on how you think. First is to develop a critical thought process. Thomas Jefferson said the greatest threat to democracy is ignorance. And I would submit to you we're swimming in a sea of it. So we're going to train you how to think critically. And secondly, we're going to train you how to use inductive logic. Inductive logic. We want to impart to you 2 critical elements of learning that is taught nowhere in the United States. First, the importance of being a good listener. Your greatest president, George Washington, was perhaps the greatest listener. He gave counsels of war and listened to lieutenants. The operation at Yorktown was essentially a French operation that Rochambeau imparted on Washington more than a year before, north of West Point in an encampment. He encouraged Washington to abandon his strategy of a fixed battle against the British at Boston and New York and move the Continental Army south, where Rochambeau would have de Grasse move the French fleet from the West Indies and encircle Cornwallis at Yorktown. Washington not only listened to what he was told, he acted on what he was told on the information. It's very, very important. Oftentimes in history, we ignore warnings. Custer, that little bighorn, was warned to take his artillery and his Gatling guns. His excuse, they will slow me down. A day before, the Indian scouts warned him, there's more than several hundred horse prints here. You're going to need the 2nd or 3rd Cavalry. He ignored them. It was an election year, 1876. He had aspirations of running for president. Morton Thiokol engineers faxed information regarding O-rings for Challengers. O-rings, they were ignored. On December 7th, 1941, at 7:10 in the morning, 2 privates sent critical information to the information center regarding a large formation of enemy planes about 150 miles out heading due south. The lieutenant, the response, don't worry about it. The destroyer Ward engaged and sank Japanese submarines operating outside the mouth of Pearl Harbor. The warning took more than an hour to reach the commander, Admiral Husband Kimmel. 9/11 warnings were ignored. So it's critical that you be a good listener, but you must also, like Washington, act on the information presented. Second, listening. To listening, you must ask the right question. The brilliance of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations was that Smith asked the question, what made nations wealthy? It wasn't gold, and it wasn't labor. It was the division of labor that enhanced a nation's well-being. So asking the right question and being good listeners is what you should first start in your first class as you complete your degree here in the next year. Paul Ballou was my instructor at Walsh College, a wonderful humanist with respect to understanding the plight of the human condition, but a conservative. He coined the phrase unenlightened benevolence. We'll give you 3 examples. What does this mean? It goes from A to B. It's linear thought process in a non-linear universe. Let's do cash for clunkers. We'll sell more cars. Let's take a look at that using an analogy. How many of you ever watched the movie series Star Trek? Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Ricardo Montalban takes control of a Federation warship, attacks the Enterprise. Toward the end of the movie, Enterprise returns to her bearings. And the Enterprise is out front, and Khan is behind. And Kirk goes to Spock, what do you think? And Spock says, his tactics are rudimentary. And Kirk says, Z minus 3,000. And the Enterprise does what? And Khan does this. And the Enterprise does that. Bang. You are dealing with linear thinkers in a non-linear universe.